Now for today's program. Mallory Lewis is a prolific author of children's literature, an award-winning performer, and dedicated philanthropist who has raised millions of dollars for breast cancer research. Since the death of her mother, Shari Lewis, in 1998, she has appeared with Lamb Chop and entertained audiences across thousands of venues around the world. Mallory is the co-author of the upcoming book, Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop, The Team That Changed Children's Television. Nat Segaloff is a writer, producer, teacher, and journalist. He is the author of Arthur Penn, American Director, and Hurricane Billy, The Stormy Life and Films of William Friedkin, among many others. He is the producer of the A&E biography documentary, Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop, and the co-author of the upcoming book, Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop, The Team That Changed Children's Television. Joining Mallory and Nat today is Moment editor Sarah Breger. Sarah is also the director of Moment's Daniel Pearl Investigative Initiative. Please welcome Mallory Lewis, Nat Segaloff, and Sarah Breger.
Hi, thank you, Suzanne, and thank you, Mallory and Nat, for being here. I know it's very early in California, so we appreciate it. This is a very exciting program for me, especially. I was telling Mallory yesterday, her grandfather and my grandmother were first cousins, so I always felt like I had a special connection to Lamb Chop, a little bit of a yichus, as they call it. Mallory, I was curious what Shari's childhood was like, and what influences led her to becoming a performer.
Well, needless to say, I wasn't there, so I can't speak firsthand, but it was very magical and very musical. My grandpa was your great uncle. I don't know, was Peter Pan the Magic Man, the official magician for the city of New York under Mayor LaGuardia. And he brought the world of magic and vaudeville into the house. My grandmother, Anne, was the music coordinator for the Bronx school system. So she brought the music into the house. And so it was a magical and musical childhood. And it all came together in my mom.
So when did Lamb Chop enter the scene?
1957, I believe. She was born on the Captain Kangaroo show. Mom had these two awful puppets like Taffy Twinkle and Samson Something, which were, I think, Jerry Mahoney puppets that she slapped a wig on. And she was performing. The Captain Kangaroo show said, "We love you, but we hate your dummies. Do you have anything else?" And it gets a little murky here. I was always told that somebody came up to my grandfather and said, "Your daughter does puppets. My daughter sews." And so that was how she got Lamb Chop, but that is not, in fact, the case. That was a fantasy. So there was a woman.
It was a public relations question.
Public relations, yes. There was a woman who was a felt artist who Mom had seen something that she had made and then designed Lamb Chop. But either way, Lamb Chop's been around and loved for a very long time. And who amongst us truly knows our origin story?
That's true. Nat, was this style of performance typical for the time? Like, how did Shari and Lamb Chop compare to other children's programming that was happening back then?
Well, children's programming was, of course, a major part of television because there was nothing else to do and they didn't pay children's performers an awful lot. So Shari was unique in that she was a woman and you had very, very few girls, as it was in those days, doing ventriloquism. There were a number of children's shows. In fact, some of the viewing audience may be old enough to remember that when they got home from school, 3:30 in the afternoon, local television stations were jammed with children's programming and Saturday mornings as well. But it was primarily the Howdy Doody show and those programs that were on in the afternoon that got you between school and when Dad came home and Mom put dinner on the table, because we're talking the middle 50s, that children's programming flourished. And then when it became viable for the TV stations and networks to sell to higher priced advertisers, they kicked the children's shows off of the afternoons and put them in the Saturday morning ghetto. And this is where we join the story of Shari Lewis, who were the various programs. became one of the dominant figures in children's television on Saturdays, although she did for a while with her creative partner, Lan Oken, produce shows in the afternoons, but that was on the local New York station. So Shari really began as an all-around entertainer, and she honed her craft locally and then had the privilege of going network, where of course she put everybody else to shame.
It's funny because people say, you know, it's amazing how famous your mom is. It been everybody of a certain generation knew her. And there were 3 stations, ABC, NBC, CBS. So at any given moment, 1/3 of the population in the country was watching any one of those shows. And I think what made mom's shows so special is she never talked down to kids. The jokes were not necessarily slapstick jokes. She wanted the parents to be as entertained as the children. And so that made her much more palatable. Because, you know, if you're a mom or dad and you are watching TV with your kid, other than the song that doesn't end, the most annoying jingle on the planet, you know, you want to be entertained too. And our jokes were always written on 2 levels. And I don't think it hurt that mom had a curvy little figure. I think a lot of the dads enjoyed watching because of that.
Shari worked on a couple of different levels, largely because of the influence of her mother and especially her father, Doc Hurwitz, who believed in something the family called edutainment, which was education combined with entertainment. And that is, if you're having fun, you can learn. And Doc had a magical way with kids who could get any kid to listen within seconds by pulling a handkerchief out of somebody's ear or whatever. And he was just one of these truly magical people. And Shari inherited that magic.
Well, we all know that, you know, we all learned our ABCs the same way, by singing it. Anything, music is on the left side of the brain, although creating music's on the right side of the brain. And anytime you can get your right and your left to talk, something we're having a little bit of an issue with at the moment on a more global scale. But wait, I digress. Anytime you can get both sides of your brain to work together, the material sinks in much more quickly.
One other theme in your book, which by the way is great, I think I really recommend everyone read it, is what a savvy businesswoman Shari was. I don't think people realize that. She was always working. She was always, I think we'd call her a hustler nowadays, in a way.
She was the most focused human being on the planet, then and now. She was determined to remain in the public eye. She was determined to be the best that she could be. I was talking to someone the other day about how my mom was really never into fashion. If there was an extra $1,000, it was not going to go to a purse with a specific name on it. It was going to go to more music lessons, more dance lessons, more. And this was at a point where she legitimately could have said, I can sing, I can dance, I don't need these lessons. But she was, her goal was the constant pursuit of excellence. Women were not in business when she began. I've been watching Julia, the show on Julia Childs, and Julia was much more, at least initially, deferential. Nobody would ever use the word deferential to describe my mother. Yeah, she was very focused, very hardworking. And this was a time when she was making $5,000 a week and my dad was making, I don't know, 50 a week. And he had to co-sign for a credit card.
Wow.
Yes, very, very Margaret Atwood, Handmaid's Tale period of time, the 50s, or as we like to call it, the 20s.
Here's how much of an opportunist Shari was. There was a fine rehearsal pianist in New York City by the name of Lan Oken, who eventually, of course, became her creative partner. And Shari needed a new song for an audition. She only had one audition, and she needed something else. So she bumped into Lan in a rehearsal hall and says, "You're Mr. Oken's kid, right? Hey, would you write a song for me?" They didn't even know each other. And she went right up and approached this guy who was kind of a genius in his own way. And that's how our partnership was formed. But she just thought of it at the moment and pursued it.
And Lanny was definitely the best writer for Lamb Chop. But he heard her voice so clearly. And he was also the world's fastest. When I took over performing with Lamb Chop, I would call my Uncle Lanny, who lived about 6 miles away from me, and say, Lanny, I need a song with the 50 presidents, or however many there were at that moment, or 25 presidents. And by the time I hung up the phone, Lanny would be at my door with that song. And Mom, and I am lucky to say I have inherited that trait, we learn things really quickly. So I'm sure that Lanny wrote the song in 1.5 minutes, and Mom was performing it 3 minutes later.
And we should also point out that Lan, down the line, married Shari's kid sister, Barbara, and they have a really, really close relationship.
So all in the family.
Yeah.
Did Shari ever receive any pushback for maybe not embracing traditional gender roles that
Oh God, yes.
prevalent at
Oh yeah, especially from the other moms. Mom never, I mean, has anyone ever asked your partner, oh, how do you balance working and being a father? No. So it is still happening today that there is a huge gender pushback. And sadly, I think it is dominantly from other women. My mom was not a class mom. She didn't drive carpools. Well, first of all, she didn't drive, so that would have eliminated the whole, but part of the reason she didn't get a driver's license is she didn't want to be stuck driving carpools. My grandmother never became a principal, which is what she wanted to be, because my grandfather expected dinner on the table. Not in, I mean, back then it was the actual 20s as opposed to these 20s, but yes, huge amounts of pushback. She was once at a meeting with somebody and was pitching something, and the person said, well, what's to stop me from just taking your idea? And she looked at the person in the eye and said, do not mistake me for Lamb Chop. So yes, and it didn't help her that she was tiny, because as you know, our family are diminutive people.
very short people. That is true.
I prefer the term diminutive, but that's okay.
There's a story that is told very early in the book, and I don't know if it comes from Mallory or by way of Mallory from Shari, that Shari didn't always appreciate isn't the word. Let's say get along with the people who were assigned to direct her shows. And there's one indication of a rather oppressive floor director who was giving her some orders she didn't like. And they're in a conference, and he's looking around the studio, and he's looking for an electrical outlet. And he finally says, excuse me, but where's the source of power in this room? And Shari points at herself and says, right here, Buster, right here.
Yes.
One thing that came up in the book a few times that was surprising was that Shari did not love children. And is that true?
Well, what adult actually genuinely loves other people's children? I mean, they're small. They ask why constantly. They're constantly trying to kill themselves by running into things or off of things or in front of cars. I mean, children are great. I love other people's children, and then they leave the house. So she didn't love children. People often ask me that, and I'm like, well, it's kind of creepy if an adult loves other people's children. I mean, we warn against stranger danger. She didn't love children, but she respected children. She respected their potential. She respected their ability to learn. As she often said, we must do better by our children. They are our only source of future adults. So she cared a great deal about children, but she didn't go to playgrounds and lurk in the sandbox to play with them.
Another thing in the book that I found interesting was that I didn't realize that how talented she was. She was a singer, she was a dancer, she conducted for orchestras. Did she ever chafe against being put in this kind of children's entertainer box by so many people.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I often joke that my mom wanted to be an adult entertainer, not that kind of adult entertainer, but yeah, she was an actress. She danced with ABT for a while, but Lamb Chop is absolutely wonderful, but it is definitely, it's kind of like being a nun. Like once people recognize you as Lamb Chop's person or as a nun, they get shocked when you act like a normal human being. Because they like, mom and Lamb Chop provided a very safe space for people mentally. And nobody wants to see a nun, at Studio 54. It's just awkward because it's not what you think of. My mom, in fact, had her 50th birthday at Studio 54. I was in New York at the time as a 20-year-old, and I was horrified because, and it was I think the party started at 7. It's not like she wasn't dancing in cages, but the whole idea, wait till your daughter grows up and she'll look at you and go, Mom, because it's amazing how many syllables they can put into the word mom at that age. But yeah, she was a perfectly normal human being, but people like to think of her as the nice little puppet lady.
It was also nice for her to have that veneer of being a children's entertainer and somewhat virginal, because there's the story of when she was in England and she cashed a check that she'd been paid for performing in England. And she and her husband, Jeremy, were coming back to America. And she put all the cash into her brassiere. And they went through customs that way. When Jeremy found out about it, because he didn't know beforehand, are you kidding? Why did you do that? Shari said, well, who's going to look in Shari Lewis's brassiere?
Yes. I hope the statute of limitations have run out on that particular tax fraud. But
very uplifting story, I would think.
Oh, good one, Nat.
Thank you very much. I'm here till Thursday. Tip your weight.
Try the cheese.
Try the
Right.
or whatever. Nat, I think you wrote in the book, Shari and American television share a history. For half a century, they influenced one another, adapted their methods to meet new challenges, and shaped the field of children's programming. Could you tell me a little bit about what you meant by that?
Well, when Mallory and I wrote that, it was because she adapted as she went along. And that is whether it was a local station or a network, whether it was something for a small audience or a large audience, she learned to change. She learned to bring modern mentions into the routine she did. So as television adapted and found new audiences for children, doing product-based television shows or things like that, well, Shari avoided the crass elements of that. But she did adapt and know that kids were learning new things. They were learning things faster. They had other places to get information, and she held steady while at the same time adapting to the new media. She went into home video, one of the first children's entertainers ever to go into home video. She would change as she knew the venue would change.
If she were alive today, she would have a million followers on TikTok.
Right, absolutely. She had her finger really on the pulse of the young audience, and the older audience that had their finger on the other pulse of the young audience.
I think, one thing is remarkable is that every generation kind of has a Shari Lewis memory in a way. So for some people, Lamb Chop's play along. For some people, it's the Shari Lewis show.
People always say, "Oh, your mom was my generation," and I'm like, "Yes, if you're basically 28 to dead, mom was your generation."
Talk about the hair color. Now we talk about the hair color. That's the best story.
Oh, I obviously am a completely natural redhead. I got it genetically from my mother's, from the same bottle. But the reason my mom became a redhead was in TV, when it was black and white, they had trouble with contrast. Now, Sarah, my mom's hair and my hair originally is the color of your hair because we're cousins, identical. And Lamb Chop's very white. And they just had trouble balancing the camera, the dark hair against the white. So she became a redhead. And so did I.
Wow. And then that was her signature look forever. Wow.
Forever. Yes.
That's amazing.
And
When my
it shows
son
how
was born,
it shows how
he-
specific Shari could be about knowing the technical end of television as well as the stuff in front of the camera to performing it.
when my son was born, he came out and his hair was reddish because my ex-husband had reddish hair. And the doctor goes, "Oh, look, he has red hair just like your mom." And we laughed.
In terms of, to turn to Lamb Chop, first, Mallory, I've heard you say a few times that Lamb Chop is your brother or your sister. Your sister.
Yes.
So what was it like having a lamb as a sibling growing up?
It was great. I mean, I have never had a moment's jealousy, competitiveness, anything like that with Lamb Chop. I don't. People are constantly asking me. Someone was. We are right now doing a documentary called Shari and Lamb Chop. And when I was being interviewed by the director said, someone said that Lamb Chop was at your wedding. How did you feel about that? I go, great. My famous sister spoke at my wedding. Why would I have an issue with that? So I always loved it. I mean, I keep one in the car so that if I have gotten out of more traffic tickets by pulling out Lamb Chop. I cannot even tell you. So she's gets me bumped up to first class on airplanes. She's been a big part of my son's life. When I toured with the USO for about 10 years, and that's because of Lamb Chop. They didn't actually want me, they wanted her, but she can't travel unaccompanied because she's a minor. And Jamie's got to fly an F-18 flight simulator. He's been in big military parades. I mean, she is very generous in sharing her fame with her family.
And why do you think kind of Lamb Chop has this enduring legacy? And
she's honest. Lamb Chop is honest. Lamb Chop says what we're all thinking. Lamb Chop trended #7 on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. And people were writing the most lovely things. She's an influencer now, she's decided. Kids, what are you going to do? But she's honest. She says what she feels. She says what we're all really thinking. She says it sweetly. She harkens people back to a time that was not scary, where the country was not torn apart, where I guess Russia was looming then as well. But she reminds people of a safe and happy time in their life.
And in the, in the 50s and 60s, you could say that show business was Jewish, but I was curious if
Still is. Don't you know we're controlling all the media?
But did she ever face any discrimination for being Jewish, or did she ever think she had to couch her Judaism in a certain way?
Absolutely not, nor would she. My mother was very political. She was very strong and completely unapologetic. Don't know where I got it from. And no, she did the first Hanukkah and Passover specials for kids. No, we are a completely non-religious family. Nobody believes in God in my family, but we all believe in being Jewish and are extremely proud of that. Plus lox, bagels, and cream cheese.
Always.
The best food. That's what I had for breakfast.
Yeah, I do think, right, that Passover and Hanukkah specials, at least for me, was the first time seeing those holidays really celebrated, on video and then on television.
Yes.
She also wrote a number of books, such as 1 Minute Bible Stories, 1 Minute. Did she write Jewish stories too? She wrote a number.
But she was very honest, because when she did write 1 minute stories of sisters and brothers and Jewish stories and Bible stories. But when she did the video for 1 Minute Bible Stories, she brought Florence Henderson in because she really didn't feel that she could tell those stories, the New Testament stories, with the same confidence with which she could tell the Old Testament stories. So that was great for me, though, because Florence Henderson, her son went to school with me, but that she was a huge star when I was little. And so it was very exciting having her in the house. The only person who was more exciting was when Margaret Hamilton came to the house, who was the Wicked Witch. I was 5 years old, and I came into the living room. Mommy was having a meeting, and it was clearly the Wicked Witch. I mean, she wasn't Wicked Green, but supposedly I came in, took one look, and screamed and ran out of the room and up the stairs. And my mom was horrified. She was like, "Oh, Margaret, I'm so sorry." And Margaret goes, "It happens all the time." But there's lots of great stories in the book, and I do hope that everybody goes out and gets it. And I also have to give credit where credit is due. I told the stories, but most of the writing was Nat's, and I'm very grateful to have been able to work with him and not have to do most of the work.
Thank you, Mal. It was a privilege to get in touch again with one of my childhood heroes. You know, when I was a little kid growing up in Silver Spring, Maryland, we had very few people who looked our age who we could relate to, and Shari was very much a big sister to everybody my age. At the same time, boys my age remembered that Shari Lewis had arthritis in both hands, and that was something that attracted us as well.
One of the funny things that happened when we were writing the book was we got to it was the third revision, you know, where your eyes are basically crossing, and I live pretty far out in Malibu, and Nat has graciously always come to my house, and I always feed him. And we read some story that somebody said, Shari always insisted the meetings were at her house, but she fed me. I thought, oh, okay. But you know, we all learn how to interact with the world from our parents. So I'm sure you're like your mommy.
Somewhat, yes.
Trust me, as time goes on, it gets more and more and more.
It becomes more apparent. That's probably true. One thing when we were talking yesterday was you guys mentioned how influential it was when Shari and Lamb Chop testified before the House Telecommunications Subcommittee. Could you describe that scene a bit and its significance?
Nat?
Well, first Shari made the appearance in front of Ed Markey, who is the savior of children's television. His entire career has understood the importance of it. Peggy Sharon, who was one of the founders of Action for Children's Television, always said that too. And of course, Shari and Peggy, who I miss dearly, were close friends. Shari made an appearance talking about how important it was. And then at one point she said, "Oh, would it be okay if Lamb Chop said a few words?" And the whole room just melted right there. All of these hardened politicians, you know, flung their lobbyists aside and said, "Okay, Lamb Chop can testify." So Shari, we didn't see her put Lamb Chop on. She reached off camera and came up with Lamb Chop. And they had a wonderful back and forth, which I won't repeat here because it's got a great punchline that's in the book. But Lamb Chop charmed everybody, and in a sense got all these hardened politicians to promise to cut some slack and give some money to children's television. It was an emotional occurrence.
What's funny is you're only allowed 3 minutes when you're testifying. And that was the funny part, and plays back to Mom's determination to get what she wanted. She wasn't done at the end of 3 minutes. And so Lamb Chop asked for her own 3 minutes. And Ed Markey, who was on Team Mom, or Mom was on Team Ed Markey, said, "Well, of course, Lamb Chop." So Mom got 6, which sums up Mom.
And again, part of what the subcommittee did, and part of what the rules were that changed with the FCC, was to cut down or cut back entirely on product-based programs. For example, the toy manufacturers would create a toy and then invent a program that would feature that toy. In other words, you had a half-hour commercial, which was something that was bad for children, especially because they were the ones who were compelling their parents to go and buy He-Man or She-Ra or whatever the latest piece of plastic was. Shari never did that. And by her and Lamb Chop action, they got Congress to cut back.
Mom's programs, yes, we sold merchandise. Yes, we sold a lot of merchandise. but the merchandise was based off the programming, not the programming based off the merchandise. Our shows always had an educational component. And, you know, for a while, people were saying things like, well, it's social, we're teaching social interaction. No, on our shows, you learned to read, you learned games, you learned confidence. That was the biggest thing that Mom taught kids, was you can do it.
She wasn't selling sweetened food. She wasn't selling candy. She wasn't selling, clothing and fashions. If anything, they were the puppets that she was merchandising. And the kids is like playing the home game, Lamb Chop the home game. She was very concerned about what kids put in them as well as into them.
Oh,
yes.
Did she ever consider, going, she was on PBS, going somewhere that was not PBS, like a Nickelodeon or something like that?
You know, whoever would have bought it is where Mom would have gone. But PBS was the perfect marriage, just because of the quality that PBS stood for. She would be on Netflix or streaming now, and she just ran out of time.
One of the things we explore in the book by speaking to television programming executives is that the audience, the core audience that Shari attracted, were not particularly attractive to advertisers because they were too young to brainwash. So PBS was the perfect place for them.
There are a few questions in the chat about Lamb Chop's, the technical aspects and kind of Lamb Chop's mouth. Someone said they loved how engaging his mouth was, and someone else is talking. Her. Yeah, I don't know why I keep calling her.
I don't either. She's your cousin, for goodness sake.
Clearly a girl. It's true.
It's Lamb Chop, not Ram Chop.
Wait, wait, there's Lamb Chop, there's Hush Puppy, and there's
Charlie Horse. Hush Puppy's a boy.
Hush Puppy's a boy.
Charlie Horse is a boy.
Okay.
And Lamb Chop, the queen.
And Lamb Chop is the baby, the younger sister.
Yes, the way we always wrote for them, Charlie Horse was a 12-year-old boy, very middle schooler, very arrogant, knew everything, picked on his younger siblings, but should anyone mess with his younger siblings, he would have stepped in. Hush Puppy, classic middle child. Not the brightest, but the wisest. Very sweet, would never do anything mean. And Lamb Chop was the little bratty baby sister.
Were they based on anyone?
I don't think so. My Uncle Lanny thinks, I think if anything, Charlie Horse was based on Uncle Lanny. Some people have said that Lamb Chop was Mom's inner child. I don't think, I personally do not think so, although many people do ascribe that.
Family dynamics to those family dynamics.
Yeah, but in my opinion, no.
So one of the questions is about why kind of Lamb Chop was always next to, your mom's mouth in a way when they were talking.
Well, part of the reason is my arm only goes so far away from my mouth. I remember we had a camera person once say, Mom was, can you get Lamb Chop a little further away? And Mom's like, no, I can't. But so, and also when you talk to somebody, you talk to them and look at them and interact with them. So Lamb Chop was always close because Lamb Chop was Mom's child, Mom's charge at any rate. And I'm sure when you talk to your daughter, Sarah, you get in close to really interact with her. So 2 reasons.
There's something else about the closeness. And I discovered this when I interviewed Shari a lot for the A&E biography I did of her. And that is, first of all, Lamb Chop needs her own microphone, which already is you buying into it. And then here's Shari and here's Lamb Chop, and they're facing the camera, and I'm about 2 feet away. And after a few moments, I find myself talking to a gym sock. Lamb Chop was alive. I totally forgot about Shari.
Lamb Chop
it was-
is alive.
Well, okay, I'm sorry. Yes, I can stumble a bit more, but I'm sorry. Lamb Chop is alive, and she was alive for me there, and it was the strangest thing because I've interviewed Brad Pitt and Charlton Heston and, you know, real big movie stars, and I could care less.
Well, it doesn't matter, Brad Pitt.
There you are.
And Heston. Hello, cousin Sarah.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, actually I wanted to ask oh, hi, Lamb Chop.
Hey,
Hello.
Lammy.
How are you doing on the beaches of Tahiti?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm sitting very close to Mallory.
You're
Isn't that amazing?
and I mean, it's amazing.
It's real. It's reality. I mean, there you
I'm
are,
not
Lammy.
an it. I'm a she.
Okay,
I don't call you it.
you want to get me too'd? So,
So
Lamb
does
Chop,
anyone have
how
any-
you been?
Does anyone have any questions for Lamb Chop?
How do you like having Mallory as a sister?
I love having Mallory as a sister. It's really fun. When Mallory did Jump for the Cause, the skydiving charity, I got to go skydiving.
Whoa.
No wonder your wool is curly.
What, baby?
No wonder your wool is curly. That would scare me.
Yes.
Jumping out of a plane.
Just trying to find a place where she's not winking in and out of the background.
Well,
I think
Tahiti
it's
is not
magic.
it.
It's like I dream of Jeannie.
But you are unquestionably there, Lamb Chop, and it's always good to see and even semi-see you.
She's
Lamb Chop,
amusing herself now. There we go.
You know, Lamb Chop also contributes to the book. We have stories from Lamb Chop in there that she tells. We have an interview with her at the end. She was able to carve time out of her busy schedule to be interviewed.
But that I
And she-
didn't get paid. I didn't get no money for being interviewed.
Yeah. You're Shari's kid, all right.
Lamb Chop's gonna take a break since I'm getting slightly nauseous watching her wink in and out of the green screen experience.
that was amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Also, I love Lamb Chop's sort of sense of humor is really unique, and it's, you know, it carries on in a way.
Well, she is who she is. It was so interesting when I took over performing with Lamb Chop. I went to Stormy Sachs, who was my mom's musical conductor and teacher, and he said, what song do you want to tackle first? And I said, well, let's do the Minute Waltz, because it was clearly the most difficult of the songs Mom and Lamb Chop did. And we got through it once, and Stormy looked at me and said, well, interestingly, Lamb Chop seems to still know her part. We're just going to have to teach you Shari's. So Lamb Chop is, I am not insane, although some people might argue that. My husband's laughing really hard right now. I know that Lamb Chop is but she's the Velveteen Rabbit. She has been loved by so many for so long that she is very much alive.
What was
And the white coats are coming now.
what was it like taking up the mantle and, you know,
Didn't
start
occur to
performing
me
with
not to. You know, when people were sending me condolence notes when Mom passed and saying, is Lamb Chop dead too? And I couldn't let that answer be yes. Also, we all parent the way, unless we've had a horrible childhood, we parent the way we were parented. I was pregnant when my mom died, and I had no idea what a childhood would look like without Lamb Chop. So it began and has continued now for 21 years.
Mallory, a question I've wanted to ask you, I should have put it in the book. What was it like being the child of a celebrity, knowing that every other kid in the world wanted to be your mother's child?
No, you know, it's interesting because the time period where I was a child was not a period where mom was on TV a lot. She was performing in Vegas. She was, I mean, I guess the first 5 years were, but I don't remember that. And, you know, I went to school with Roger Moore's kid. I went to school with Florence Henderson's kid, with Shirley Jones's kid. My mom was not famous in comparison to the famous people I grew up around. And it was never a factor for me.
Well, you're normal.
I'm surprisingly normal. Okay, stop laughing, honey. My husband's laughing again. Yeah, I mean, I'm surprisingly normal for a woman who makes her living, such as it is, talking to puppets.
One last thing from the book that I thought was funny was that Shari seemed to have a perverse pleasure in ordering lamb chops, you know, submitting recipes for lamb whenever anyone asked her to do a recipe. And where did that come from?
Well, it harkens back to the fact that she wasn't the nice little puppet lady. She was a full human being with she loved dirty jokes. When there was tension on the set, one of the puppets would use a profanity and everyone would fall to the floor laughing. She was a very political person, had very strong political views, and very active in, you know, the Democratic Party. She was and she loved to horrify people, which is clearly something that I inherited. I mean, she wasn't a flasher, but you know, her version of horrifying people was ordering lamb at a restaurant. Plus, lamb is really good.
As Mallory says before the cookbook section of the book, lamb has been feeding our family for years.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, I must offer a disclaimer. If anybody dares to try the recipes that appear in the book, they're taken right from the little 3x5 recipe cards that Shari had. We don't recommend trying them without adapting them yourself, because Shari used a kind of a shorthand that we haven't been able to figure out yet.
Yes, but the basic family lamb recipe, I'll give you one right now. Take a rack of lamb, cut it so that they're lollipops. Take Dijon mustard and minced garlic, mix it together, and then slather it on your hands and put it all over the lamb chops, and then lightly dip them in a breading of some sort, you know, whatever, Italian breadcrumbs. Broil it 3 minutes on each side. Matter of fact, I'm going to place my Whole Foods order.
Yeah, I know.
That's breakfast right now.
I was just thinking, yeah, okay, well, I know what I'm cooking now for
Exactly.
I know I see there are a bunch of questions, but there's one clip, Mallory, that I know that you want to show us. Could you set it up a little bit about what
Yes. June 17th, 1998. We were up in Vancouver shooting Charlie Horse Music Pizza, and my mom had not been well. And so I sent her to the doctor, and she called me from the doctor and said, "Darling, I have terminal cancer. I have 6 weeks to live. No red eyes. I'll be back at the studio in an hour." I'm like, what? So mom came back to the studio. We rehearsed. I very busily rewrote the last 3 shows because I only had 1 shooting day with her, and I knew we had to finish 3 shows because that's the number you have to submit for the Emmys. And it sounds like an odd priority when your mother's dying, but it was definitely the right one for my mother. So the last song that we were going to shoot was a song called Hello, Goodbye. Now, I was up in the booth looking into the monitor, and I pushed the button. I said, "Mom, we don't need to shoot this song. This episode is running long," which was true. And she looked dead into the camera and said, "Oh no, darling, you're going to need this song." And so this was the final moments of Mom on stage, after which she walked off the stage to a standing ovation. And I edited it with help up in Canada to show at her memorial. And I show it at all of our Performing Arts Center shows. And it is joyous for me to see it. I'm very lucky to have well-lit video of my dear mama. So cue mom.
Could we please get started? For Pete's sake!
In this ever-changing world, people come and people go, and some will stay. And through the years, your list of friends will grow and grow, while others come into your life and all too quickly drift away. As you move from day to day, you oftentimes will have to say hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Thank you for my little time with you. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. And I'm so sorry you're just passing through. And it helps me when I tell myself as you go on your way, I might meet someone a lot like you later on today. From sad goodbyes with lots of tears, very often we will go to happy times and better days that start up with the next hello. And the fun of life is we don't know exactly what may lie ahead. The joyous moment that could start minutes after we have said hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Thank you for my little time with you. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. I'm so sorry you're just passing through. And it helps me when I tell myself as you go on your way, I might meet someone a lot like you later on today. And because these words are part of life, and words you might use constantly, wouldn't it be wise to take the time to practice them along with me? Sing hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Thank you for my little time with you. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Hello, goodbye. Goodbye.
Wow, that was so beautiful. Thank you very much for
You're
sharing.
welcome. The documentary Shari and Lamb Chop, which will be coming out, I think, in spring of 23, will have the most footage like that, but so much more. And the book, Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop, has so many great stories in it. It's really been lovely during this lockdown, during the missing years, to spend all this time learning about my mother, as well as sharing stories of my mother. I would encourage everybody who still has their mother to sit down with a video camera, and there's plenty of books on the market, questions to ask your parents, and get some recordings of your mother talking, and to share with your children and for them to share with their children.
What was something surprising that you learned that was unexpected while you were writing the book? I guess for both of you.
Nat, you go first. Ha.
Oh, thanks a lot. Well, in addition to finding about the actual origins of lamb chop, I was surprised to learn that even though Shari was a celebrity, she was like everybody else, really inside. She was a warm person who had her own turmoils, her own problems, but you know, just because somebody's famous doesn't mean they're Martian. And you can relate to people who manage to cut through all that and still raise a good family and still have so much love to give. I mean, it sounds saccharine to say that, but I was privileged to know her just a little bit toward the end of her life. And you know, that's a sort of vaccination that keeps you from being cynical the rest of your life.
Yes, I would agree. I think the thing that I learned that was most surprising was my grandfather used to put my mom on a train at 3 by herself, and the train at the other end of the destination, the rabbi from the local temple, which was, or the JCC, would pick mom up. Just the, you know, the thought that, I mean, we certainly don't live in a world right now where you can put a 3-year-old on a train. But yeah, I mean, my mom had both a good and a complicated marriage. And as most marriages are, you know, they're not, but I think the story, she remained completely true to herself her whole life. But I think what people will find interesting is the parallels that they will be able to draw to their own life, because again, she was a real human being, a 3-dimensional, maybe she even had an extra dimension, I don't know, but she was a person like everybody else, and the decisions she made, some turned out well, some did not turn out well. But she struggled the way all women struggle to be taken seriously, to try and balance. Sometimes she balanced better than others, but we all balance better than others sometimes. So I think it's a comforting book because it paints a very real picture, but you don't end up going, God, she turned out not to be a nice person. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't break the mold of who people think she is, but it certainly will deepen it.
In an airport once, somebody recognized her and said, "Oh my gosh, aren't you the original Shari Lewis?" And Shari said, "Yes, I'm the original Shari Lewis, and with most of the original parts."
So that song, by the way, was written by Eric Troyer. Hello, Goodbye. So I just want to give him full credit. But, you know, really, Lamb Chop is known by another song, which, Sarah, I'm hoping you are going, and all of you at home, I hope you will join us. If I can find a way to put Lamb Chop so that she's not, there we go, right in front of me.
This is the song that doesn't end. Yes, it goes, come on, Sarah.
And
On and on.
hello, my friend.
Some people started singing it and not knowing what it was, and they'll continue singing it forever just because it's a song that doesn't end. Yes, it goes, Sarah, you're not singing.
Oh man.
You know, if you put Lamb Chop in front, you can't.
3.
This is the song that doesn't end. Yes, it goes on and on, my friend. Oh, Sarah's not.
Well, everybody at home is probably singing it, and they're beating their heads against the wall. It'll now be in their ears all day long.
Yeah, I'm just wowed by the talent.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Mallory's going to stay, maybe, but thank you, everybody, and please go buy my book.
It's not your book.
Sort of my book.
Thank you, Lammy.
Who wrote that song? Where did that song come from?
A gentleman by the name of Norman Martin. Mom said to him, please write a song that, you know, is a repeat circular. And Norman said he was driving home on Laurel Canyon, and all of a sudden he had to pull over because it came to him fully developed. It's actually, what's interesting is everyone sings it as the song that never ends. And the lyric is doesn't end. So clearly there's a lyric mistake, but it is way too late to go back and change that.
Let me get to, we have a few minutes for some questions. So
Okay.
I'll get to a few of them. One person asked, how did Shari get her first show on TV? And I assume it means her first full-length show.
By being very pushy would be my guess. I think she won an Arthur Godfrey Talent Scout or two. And then Saturday, there was a show that she took over, I think, called Facts and Fun.
Yeah, and she was Kitty Cartoons or Kitty Carnival, one of those things. They
Yeah,
adapted it to her. I think Steve Krantz was one of the people involved back in those days. But you know, it's all she was everywhere at once, and then she exploded. But that's it. She took
What's
over another
funny
show.
is the person who gave her first show, a gentleman named Steve Krantz, was married to my Aunt Judy, but this was a decade before my mom even met my dad. So there are like 6 Jews in show business, and they all seem to have married into my family.
One person asked about the Star Trek episode that Shari wrote.
The Lights of Zetar.
Yeah, how did that come about? I think most people are not familiar with that story at all.
My mom and dad wrote an episode called Lights of Zetar, 3rd season, arguably the most boring Star Trek episode ever written. But they invented a planet called Memory Alpha, which was the repository for all the knowledge in the universe. And Star Trek's Wikipedia page is called Memory Alpha. So and that has translated forward. She wrote the guest role for herself. And when 3 weeks before they started shooting, the producer's or director's girlfriend got the role. My mom never forgave that. She was so annoyed. Flash forward 40 years, and I'm at a Star Trek convention with my son because we're total Star Trek geeks in this family. And somebody came over and said, I felt really bad when that happened to your mom. It was someone who had been on the show. And I said, well, she is still mad about it and she's dead. And the guy goes, like this. He was so horrified. But yeah, that I think with the exception of making me, I think that's the coolest thing my parents ever did.
And another person asked, did politics or beliefs play into what Lamb Chop and Shari talked about?
Yes, very much so. She usually made it age appropriate, but on talk shows and other things, she was very political, very pro women's rights, a huge supporter of the Democratic Party and of Planned Parenthood and of all causes, female and children.
And last question, I'll put a few together. People were wondering if she had any relationship with Mr. Rogers or Sesame Street or other kind of contemporary classic TV shows that you think of.
I don't believe that. I'm sure she knew Mr. Rogers. She was on one episode of Sesame Street.
I remember that.
She and LeVar Burton were friendly. I mean, they knew each other because that was the Reading Rainbow versus Lamb Chop's play along. Mom always won the Emmy for performing. That was kind of fun. Sorry, LeVar. But you know, she didn't really have time for friends. She was working very, very hard all the time. She was not into the nonsense of Hollywood. And she had a husband and a kid. And as all working moms know, that does not leave an awful lot of time for anything else.
Well, thank you. Nat, is there anything you'd like to say before we go?
What she said.
What she said.
Just please buy the book because my dog needs food.
Yeah. And it's a really great read, I really have to say. Thank you guys so much. This was a really remarkable program, I think. Thank you for, getting up early to do it. I'm so glad we were able to do this.
It was great.
Thanks very much.
And I love meeting a new cousin. So I look forward to
family WhatsApp chat or
yes.
Whatever.
Yes. And thank it is so meaningful to me that how much love people have for my mom. I always start my Performing Arts Center shows by saying, thank you all for being here. I know you all wish you could have bought a ticket for Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop, but it's okay. I wish you could have too. And so during this show, you will get to see me and Lamb Chop sing and dance and do comedy. And you'll also get curated videos of mom, because my show is both, because people, whatever hairstyle you remember of mom, you end up getting to see it in the show. You'll end up getting to see it in the documentary, and you will certainly end up getting to read about your Shari in our book, Shari Lewis and Lamb Chop.
Where can people see you perform? I think you now have a legion of new fans who want to.
Yay! I will have a new calendar. I haven't performed in 2 years because COVID. What's the last group that's coming back to the Performing Arts Center? Children under 5 and their grandparents. But I do have some shows coming up in the fall, God willing, and Omicron be damned. And I'll have a calendar up on my website, Mallory Lewis and lambchop.com, within a week.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Please register for next week's seminar. I think back to the usual time on Tuesday at 4:30. And thank you guys again. Take care.
Bye,
Bye.
guys.
Pleasure.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.